Have I mentioned lately how much I love carburetors? So this is one that I know that tens of thousands of you are going to find useful, especially if you're dealing with a carbureted Harley Davidson with one of these CV40 Carbs, and you're experiencing mid-range rideability issues. Stumble, hold back, sneezing through the carburetor. I'll get to all of that in a minute. But these CV40s, this was the universal Harley Davidson carburetor. A couple of small variations through the model years, but essentially they function the same. And what I'm going to go into here is a simple modification that anybody can make using basic hand tools and a trip to Home Depot in $2 that'll clear up 90% of the most common problems you're going to come across. Common problems meaning that you put a set of slip-ons on it, a set of drag pipes, you change the air filter, air cleaner assembly. And now it's just not right. It's not quite right, especially in the mid-range. Quarter throttle to like 3/4 throttle. Holds back a little bit, maybe sneezes. It needs to be richened up. So I'll tell you how I ended up making this video and what I just went through, because I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to this too. I have a 04 883 Custom that I picked up off a marketplace over the summer. Wasn't running when I bought it, had a bad intake gasket, and I'll get to that in a second. I got it running, and it's completely stock with the exception of a set of drag pipes. Previous owner put a set of drag pipes on it. So bought it during the summer, got it running during the summer, and around here it's 85, 90, 95 degrees. So I noticed the bike was a little hesitant in the mid-range. It just wasn't quite there, but not enough for me to bother breaking out the tools and working on it. Well, now the temperatures dropped into the 60s, high 50s, and the air is much denser. Denser air carries more oxygen. More oxygen requires more fuel. So now my minor rideability problem, that little bit of a lean spot that it had, is bad enough to the point that it's really wanting to choke off. That mid-range, it's just not there. All right, so I want to explain how these carburetors work for those who aren't familiar. If you know your way through one of these carbs and you know all of the various fuel circuitry and at what point what system takes over, then just skip ahead towards the end of the video. But I want everybody watching this to have a thorough understanding of these carbs and why these changes make a difference. And also why some changes really shouldn't be made. So, like I says, basically universal Harley Davidson carburetor. Couple of variations. The earliest ones didn't have accelerator pumps, and then like sometime around like 1990 or thereabouts they added accelerator pumps, but that has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. There are 4 basic phases to the fuel metering on one of these carburetors, and they kind of overlap. They go from idle to full throttle, and like I said, those 4 phases overlap each other. So what we'll do is we'll tear this one down and we'll talk about each of those phases as we go along. But before we even start taking things apart, externally, the idle mixture screw, which it's only supposed to handle idle. Now a lot of guys will go and, so, all right, you've put a set of pipes on it. Now it seems a little bit lean and it's holding back a little bit. You can minorly clean that up by going an extra turn and a half on the idle mixture screw. But don't do that. That's not the way to fix this. The reason being is that even though you may have cleaned up a little bit of a stumble, a little bit of a mid-range lean spot, what you're doing now is when it returns to idle, you're giving the engine way too much fuel. So it may idle okay, but in the meantime, it's dirtying up the plugs, it's carboning up the combustion chambers and the pistons and the rings, and it's just a bad thing to do. The factory sets these between 1 3/4 turns out. And like I said, if you've got a minor lean spot, you put a set of drag pipes on the bike and you just want to clean it up a little bit. The inclination there is to knock the plug out, because these carburetors are sealed from the factory with a little plug they put in there. And the way you get it out is you just drill it, and once you've got a hole through it, just pop it right out. So the quick backyard fix there is to just screw this thing out until it off idle is a little bit better, but like I said, don't do it. It's not the way to go. They are set exceptionally lean from the factory, so you could go a quarter, a half turn past where it's set there, or where it's set from the factory, and it will generally make the bike run better, but don't go past that, and especially don't use this to try to clean up any running problems. All right, so that's the first phase of fuel metering on one of these carburetors. Now for the second phase, we have to go inside of it. And I loosened up these screws ahead of time. Be forewarned, your bowl screws are gonna be really tight, especially if this thing's never been taken apart before. So you wanna actually have the carburetor on a flat surface, a screwdriver that actually, fits the screw well, right? Make sure it's buried in there just right, and push down out while you turn. Otherwise, you'll literally tear the hex out of the head of the screw. So, as I've already pre-loosened these things. Butterfingers, I can't make a video without dropping something, right? It's kind of like tradition now. All right, one more. Okay. So once we got the bowl off of this thing, it's actually really nice in there. Carburetor looks like hell on the outside, but really clean and nice in there. So, idle mixture screw only handles idle. Now, the circuit that feeds the idle mixture screw and the circuit that feeds just off idle performance is the low-speed jet. So the low-speed jet is located down in that hole right there. And again, these things are in there from the factory. If it's never been taken apart, they're in there tight. So make sure you've got a screwdriver that fits the opening and fits down into the slot securely. When you go to break these things, firm surface, push down, and you'll hear it crack as it loosens up. So this is your low-speed jet. Now, if you're going to jet the carburetor, they'll sell you an assortment of like 4 of these things. For the most part, for a mildly modified bike, so like it's just slip-ons or drag pipes, air cleaner, you probably don't have to do anything with this. But this is what handles just off idle. Your accelerator pump actually helps a lot with that, just off idle. But small changes in throttle that aren't enough to activate the accelerator pump, this is where all your fuel flow is coming from. Now, increasing the size of the low-speed jet will clean up part throttle somewhat. But once you go past quarter throttle or so, and that's where most of your lean conditions manifest themselves, once you go past like quarter throttle or so, this really isn't doing anything. At that point, the next phase kicks in. So for the next phase, we're gonna have to take the top of this carburetor off. So first things first, should have loosened this first. Okay. We've got to pull off the throttle bracket. And again, the first time you do one of these, those screws are going to be tight. So make sure you got a well-fitting screwdriver and push down. Butterfingers. I should edit stuff like that out, but I don't. I just leave it in. And it's like a punishment to myself, so when I rewatch it, I can cringe. There's got to be a psychological thing going on there. Okay. So we take these 4 screws out. Yeah, that's right. That one flew off and hit me in the leg. Yeah. All right. So now, once we take our top off, we're going to see that we've got our spring there. Okay. And this spring, there's another one hit the floor. I can't believe I do this stuff. So this spring is there to overcome this diaphragm. So let's pop that spring out, and you've got this diaphragm right here. I don't even know what fell. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. These are the important parts, and they're in my hand. So if you look at the bottom of this slide, you'll see a little tiny hole there, all right? There's the needle sticking out, and above the needle is a little hole. So when you go to quarter throttle or so, there's enough vacuum being pulled through that hole to overcome the spring and let that diaphragm pull up on the slide. And when the slide comes up, it pulls that needle up. And now we're getting to the third phase of fuel management, okay? So you've got your idle mixture adjustment, your low speed jet, and now we're in that mid-range quarter throttle to half throttle or so. And that's where the needle comes in. So now if we flip this over, we have this holder, so it goes in this way, okay? And this holds the spring holds this down. And this in turn holds this needle down, the needle valve down. Now, this needle valve is being pushed into, so here's your main jet, okay? We're not getting to the main jet yet, but the part that the main jet screws into is the important thing. The emulsion tube, okay? So there's your main jet, and then the emulsion tube, or jet holder, okay. Now, when the vacuum, when velocity of air passing under the slide isn't enough to create vacuum in the slide, in that chamber with the diaphragm, the spring is pushing this down into the emulsion tube. And that pointy part of the needle is closing off any fuel flow through the main jet. When you open the throttle and RPM comes up, there's enough velocity passing under the slide to create a low pressure area in here inside the diaphragm, overcome the spring, and then raise this up out of the jet, the main jet. So here's the important thing to know about these needles. Their height in relation to where the slide is, so whether they're buried down and shutting off flow completely or they're raised partially, their height and their taper dictate fuel flow through the mid-range. So a lot of people make a mistake now where they're trying to clean up a mid-range hesitation, a lean spot, and they'll just throw a larger jet in it. But just putting a larger jet won't do anything for that mid-range, because the taper of this needle, its position up and down, and the amount of taper is what actually dictates the fuel flow. And you can take the jet completely out, but it's not going to make any difference as to how much fuel gets through when this thing is only lifted, let's say 60, 70, 80 thousandths of an inch. The jet isn't going to make any difference. So this is where the hack comes in. This is where you take your $2 and you run over to Home Depot and you go to the fastener aisle and you buy a package of these number 4 flat brass washers. They don't have to be brass, there's nothing special about that, but it's their size. Their size is absolutely perfect to fit. Get one out of here. Their size is absolutely perfect to fit over the needle like so, but still allow the needle to fit down into its holder. Right? So what you're doing by adding this shim, by adding this washer, you're raising the needle, the thickness of the washer, and the thickness of the washer, these are 25 thousandths of an inch thick each. So you're raising the needle at 25 thousandths of an inch, and what that'll do is pulls more of the taper out of the emulsion tube and allows more fuel to flow through in the mid-range. So this is what you're looking for. $2, you go to Home Depot, you get a lifetime supply of these in one package. And don't forget to heed the safety warnings. Warning, Wear safety goggles, user and bystander. Okay, they're not screwing around with that. If you're going to use these things, make sure you're wearing your safety glasses, goggles, a full face helmet, keep the visor down. Anybody who's crazy enough to be standing around you when you're working with these things, make sure that they've got all of their protection. I mean, I would go as far as hazmat clothing, but that's just me. You know, I'm a safety guy. Thank goodness this doesn't cause cancer or reproductive harm in California. But maybe it does. I don't know. All right, so we take our 25 thousandths of an inch thick shim, which is going to raise this needle 25 thousandths of an inch in the emulsion tube, and we put it over the needle like so, and then we drop it into the slide like so, and then we drop our holder in like so, and then we take this whole jammy and we stick it back in the carburetor. Come on, we could do this. Yes, success. And then reassemble. While you're at it, make sure you inspect the diaphragm over here. If it's dried out, if you see any cracks, that'll give you another situation where you're dealing with a lean spot, because it's not going to want to pull up the way it's supposed to. If it's lazy, if it's slow, it'll give you a lean overall condition, even if everything else is in the right proportion. And like I says, the main jet only comes into play once this is all the way up, once the slide is all the way up, okay, and that needle is pulled almost all the way out of the emulsion tube. That's when you get full flow through the jet. So if you've got a lean condition, let's recap, okay? If you've got a lean condition at idle, it won't idle right at all, right? It'll barely idle. And you've got your mixture adjustment set around 1.5, 2 turns or thereabouts, then it's probably this gasket leaking. And listen, anytime you take one of these carburetors off, it's not a bad idea to replace this gasket if it's an old one. If you've replaced it and it's new, lube it up and make sure it's seated correctly before you go to push this thing back into the intake manifold, or it'll rip and crack. And this one over here actually has some cracks in it. Oh, here, look at this. The whole thing is foobarred, okay? Vacuum leak, that'll, if your bike isn't idling, there you go. Then your idle, it's just raining parts. It's just raining parts. It's the typical, you know, UTG how-to video, right? So, I think that covers pretty much everything. I think it better cover everything, because I'm just done. I'm done. I covered as much of it as I feel I needed to. What a mess I made. I do this every friggin' time. I swear to God, I am nowhere near this sloppy or butterfingered when I'm just working by myself. But when you're trying to make a video and you're trying to remember all of these things and do all of this, yeah, it's not as easy as it looks. It's not as easy as it looks. What are you gonna do? I hope you got something out of that. I'll see you tomorrow.